These are the real architects of rock and roll who built the foundation of American popular music decades before Elvis ever stepped into Sun Studio. This is the story of Sister Rosetta Tharpe, the godmother of rock and roll, a black woman who plugged in an electric guitar in 1938 during the height of Jim Crow segregation and created the blueprint that every rock legend would follow. Born Rosetta Nubin on March 20th, 1915, in Cotton Plant, Arkansas, she entered this world during an era when a black woman holding an electric guitar wasn't just unusual, it was revolutionary. Her father, Willis Atkins, and her mother, Katie Bell, picked cotton and preached the gospel under the brutal reality of Jim Crow laws, part of a tradition where music wasn't just entertainment, it was survival, resistance, and salvation rolled into one powerful force. By age 4, little Rosetta had mastered the guitar. Picture this. While most children are learning to tie their shoes, she was already bending strings on what would later become her signature Gibson SG Custom, finding her voice through 6 steel strings. At 6 years old, she was touring the South with her mother's evangelical troupe, billed as a singing and guitar playing miracle. This was not child exploitation, this was destiny announcing itself. The Church of God in Christ, where Rosetta grew up, understood something that the broader culture would take decades to grasp. Gospel music wasn't just accompaniment for Sunday service, it was a weapon for winning souls, a vehicle for transcendence, and in young Rosetta's hands, it would become the foundation for an entirely new sound that would reshape American music forever. When mother and daughter settled in Chicago in the mid 1920s, Rosetta began the musical alchemy that would define her legacy. She took Delta blues, grabbed the jazz innovations of New Orleans, and mixed them with the spiritual power of gospel pioneered by Thomas Andrew Dorsey, then fused them into something the world had never heard before. She was not just playing music, she was inventing rock and roll, note by note, riff by riff, decades before anyone thought to call it that. In 1934, at 19 years old, she married Thomas Tharpe, a Church of God in Christ preacher, taking his name and the sister title that would define her public persona. By 1938, her musical vision had outgrown the constraints of traditional gospel performance. She made a decision that would scandalize the religious community and change music history forever. She left her husband and moved to New York City with her mother, October 31st, 1938. Remember that date. That is when Rosetta walked into a Decca record studio and laid down tracks that would make her an overnight sensation. Her first recording, Rock Me, written by Thomas Andrew Dorsey, became a hit that bridged sacred and secular in ways that made both audiences take notice. But it was her performance style that truly set her apart. Picture this. December 23rd, 1938, at Carnegie Hall for the Spirituals to Swing concert. Here is this young black woman with a Gibson Les Paul electric guitar standing on one of America's most prestigious stages, playing gospel music with the attack and distortion of what would later be called rock and roll. She was not just performing, she was prophesying the future of American music. The Cotton Club performances that same year caused even more of a stir. Conservative religious circles were appalled. A woman playing electric guitar in a nightclub setting, sometimes performing gospel songs while scantily clad showgirls danced nearby. Sister Rosetta Tharpe was breaking every rule in segregated America, and in the process, she was writing new ones. Her guitar technique was revolutionary. While other electric guitar players of the era aimed for clean, jazz-oriented sounds, Tharpe embraced distortion. She drove tube amplifiers hard, creating the aggressive tone that would become rock and roll's signature sound. She was doing this in 1938, 26 years before the Kinks got credit for using a broken amp on You Really Got Me. Her playing style combined thumb picking with fingerstyle techniques, creating a highly rhythmic attack that drew from jazz and bebop. She often played in vestipole tuning, open D, and her use of chromaticism was years ahead of its time. When she performed at the Apollo Theater, she engaged in guitar battles, proving she could outplay any man who dared challenge her. She would say, "Can't no man play like me. I play better than a man." In 1941, she joined Lucky Millender's swing band, cementing her position as a crossover artist who refused to be contained by genre boundaries. But it was in late 1944 when she recorded the song that would earn her a place in history, if history had been paying proper attention. Strange Things Happening Every Day hit the Billboard Race Records chart at number 2 in April 1945. This was not just a hit record. This was the first gospel record to cross over to what would later become the R&B chart. Music historians now recognize it as either a precursor to rock and roll, or more accurately, the first rock and roll record ever made, 7 years before Ike Turner's Rocket 88 would claim that title. Listen to that track today, and you will hear everything that would define rock music for the next 8 decades. Driving rhythm, electric guitar prominently featured in the mix, a vocal style that bridged sacred and secular, and an energy that was absolutely revolutionary for its time. Sister Rosetta Tharpe had created rock and roll in 1944, 11 years before Rock Around the Clock, 13 years before Elvis's first hit. But here is where the story gets complicated, where institutional racism and sexism begin to erase the contributions of the woman who literally invented the genre. In 1942, music critic Maury Ora-Denker described her style as rock and roll spiritual singing. The term existed, the style existed, the artist existed. What did not exist was a music industry ready to credit a Black woman with creating America's most influential musical form, especially when DJ Alan Freed would later claim credit for coining the term rock and roll in 1951, 13 years after Tharpe was already playing it. Throughout the 1940s, Tharpe toured with Marie Knight, both as a musical partner and, according to historical accounts, as a romantic partner. Their performances were legendary, rivaling even those of gospel queen Mahalia Jackson, and their personal relationship added another layer to why the conservative establishment wanted to minimize her influence. She was Black, she was a woman, she was playing what they considered a man's instrument, and she was living openly outside traditional heterosexual norms. The same pattern of erasure would repeat throughout music history. When Big Mama Thornton recorded Hound Dog in 1952, it became a massive hit in Black communities. But when Elvis covered it 4 years later, he got the credit for the song that made him a superstar. This was the template. Black women innovate, white men get the glory. In 1951, she staged what might be the most audacious publicity stunt in music history. She married her manager, Russell Morrison, in front of 25,000 paying customers at Washington, D.C.'s Griffith Stadium. Fans paid between 90 cents and $2.50 to watch this spectacle, most of them Black women who understood they were witnessing something unprecedented. Her wedding dress cost $800, the price of a car at the time. The ceremony ended with elaborate fireworks, including a Cupid's heart pierced with arrows designed especially for the bride and groom. This was not just a wedding. This was Sister Rosetta Tharpe proving that a Black woman could command the same attention and generate the same excitement as any white male performer. She was setting the template for stadium rock concerts decades before anyone called them that. The 1950s brought challenges. As rock and roll exploded into mainstream consciousness, the artists getting credit were predominantly white men. Elvis Presley, Jerry Lee Lewis, Chuck Berry. They were building their sounds on the foundation Tharpe had laid, but she was being written out of the story in real time. Chuck Berry would later say his entire career was one long Sister Rosetta Tharpe impersonation. Little Richard called her his greatest influence and credited her with putting him on stage for the first time when he was just a teenager. Johnny Cash referred to her as his favorite singer. Elvis loved her guitar style, according to the Jordan Ayers Gordon Stoker. Bob Dylan called her divine, not to mention sublime and splendid. Yet when the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame held its first induction ceremony in 1986, Tharpe was not included. When Rolling Stone compiled lists of guitar greats throughout the decades, her name was consistently absent. The very artists who credited her as their inspiration were being inducted into halls of fame and recognized as pioneers, while the woman who taught them how to play was forgotten. Why? Because she was technically classified as a gospel singer, since rock and roll supposedly did not exist when she was creating it, because she was Black in an era when the mainstream music industry was systematically excluding Black artists from credit for their innovations. She was marginalized because she was a woman in a field that insisted the electric guitar was a male instrument, and because many of her most iconic moments happened before the age of television, when segregated media meant Black artists could not reach white audiences the way white artists could reach Black ones. The 1957 European tours revived her career somewhat, but by then younger artists were dominating the charts, playing music she had invented. In 1964, she performed at Manchester train station for a British television special, and Eric Clapton, Keith Richards, and Jeff Beck reportedly all came to see her play. They understood what she represented, even if the official rock establishment did not. Her later years were marked by health struggles. A stroke in 1970 led to complications from diabetes and the amputation of her leg. She continued performing from a wheelchair until her death on October 9, 1973. When she died, she was buried in an unmarked grave in Philadelphia, a symbol of how thoroughly the music industry had forgotten the woman who gave birth to rock and roll. For decades, that's where the story might have ended, but in 2007, biographer Gail Wald published Shout, Sister, Shout, and suddenly music historians began to confront an uncomfortable truth. Rock and roll had a mother, not just fathers, and her name was Sister Rosetta Tharpe. That same year, she was inducted into the Blues Hall of Fame, finally receiving recognition for her foundational contributions. In 2008, a proper headstone was finally placed on her grave. In 2013, the PBS documentary Sister Rosetta Tharpe, the godmother of rock and roll, brought her story to a new generation. In 2017, she was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as an early influence 44 years after her death and 79 years after she first plugged in an electric guitar. When Brittany Howard of Alabama Shakes gave the induction speech, she said simply, "It's long overdue." In 2023, Rolling Stone finally ranked her sixth on their list of the 250 greatest guitarists of all time. In 2025, she was posthumously inducted into the National Rhythm and Blues Hall of Fame. Today, a stretch of highway in Cotton Plant, Arkansas, bears her name. The U.S. Postal Service issued a commemorative stamp in her honor. Her great-niece, Tiana Atkins, works tirelessly to preserve her legacy through educational programs and cultural initiatives. And now Lizzo is set to portray her in an upcoming Amazon biopic, declaring, "I want to make Sister Rosetta Tharpe a household name as big as Elvis. When people talk about rock and roll, it begins with her. The truth is, it always began with her. Every power chord, every distorted guitar tone, every fusion of sacred and secular, every boundary-breaking performance, it all traces back to a young Black woman from Arkansas who picked up a Gibson electric guitar in 1938 and decided to show the world what rock and roll could sound like." Sister Rosetta Tharpe didn't just influence rock and roll. She didn't just contribute to its development. She created it. The fact that it took the music establishment 80 years to acknowledge this truth tells us everything we need to know about whose stories get told and whose innovations get credited in American culture. But the truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how long it takes. Sister Rosetta Tharpe was the godmother of rock and roll, and now, finally, we're ready to call her by her rightful name, the woman who invented America's music.